As tensions rage on in Egypt, Edward Coughlan of Business Monitor International is on the phone with me now to discuss the economic implications of the unrest. Edward, frustration at a stagnated economic recovery has been cited as a causation factor behind protest in Egypt. Will a change in leadership initiate change, or is it plausible that a lengthy interim leadership could act to extend Egypt's economic woes?
Yes, economic stagnation has been important, but it's also the political factor. The Muslim Brotherhood was seen as increasingly authoritarian. They had replaced a lot of the local officials with Muslim Brotherhood members. But the change buys them some time, at least in the short term. There are huge problems that remain. I don't think it's going to extend Egypt's economic woes. We just might see sort of short-term relief before they reappear in a few months or so.
Similarly, just how difficult is the role of the interim government at present? Do you make short-term promises in an attempt to quell social unrest, or should the albeit temporary government be concentrating on longer-term policy?
I think the role of the interim government is very difficult. As I said, they probably bought some time in the short term, but they need to focus over the long term. Egypt's economic problems are structural. There's nothing that can be resolved in the next couple of months. It's going to take a few years or so. The interim government is, however, as it says in tin, they are interim. They will need to organise elections, and I think they'll try and make some sort of short-term pledge in terms of not increasing or not reducing subsidies. But over the long term, subsidies are going to be a key issue and something which could cause further protests over the next 6 months to a year.
Well, it is perhaps too early to discuss Arab Spring reloaded, as it were. One cannot argue with the protest politics policy triangle that seems to be occurring in countries such as Egypt and recently also in Turkey. Can we anticipate a new direction in monetary policy within the region?
Well, going back to the issue of the Arab Spring, I don't think we're seeing any we'll see sort of a continuation of what we saw in 2011. I think a lot of the problems in Egypt are domestic. Although there are similar causes to what's happened in Turkey and Brazil, they are domestic in factor and they aren't that related. In terms of new monetary policy, I don't think that's going to help. The government has very little flexibility in terms of how monetary policy could quell protests. The exchange rate has depreciated a lot. I think it's more fiscal issues which are going to become key, and also it's an issue of credibility. I think a lot of protesters or a lot of opposition to the government would be dissuaded if the government had a lot more credibility, or at least a facade of credibility, which wasn't present with the ruling Muslim Brotherhood.
And lastly, despite a 7% gain on Thursday following Morsi's ousting, Egypt stocks have dropped more than 2% on this Monday. As this scenario continues to play out, can we expect further yo-yoing in Egypt's stock market? Similarly, what does this mean for foreign investment in the country?
Yes, the stock market is definitely going to remain highly volatile. We're going to see jumps and retractions of similar percentages to what we've seen over the last few days. The stock market will remain event-driven as well, and there will be announcements of elections or possibly the actual event of elections which will see a big bounce or a big fall in the stock market. One thing I would say is that although we've seen improvement in credit default swaps and yields, as well as gains in the stock market, I think these are overdone, and people are putting a little bit too much faith in what the military and the interim government can do in the short term. I think we're going to see a retracement CDS probably spike in the coming weeks, and so will yields. In terms of investors, I imagine it's going to be an issue of wait and see. The situation is in flux at the moment. I don't think anyone's going to put money in Egypt for the time being. Once there's a clearer direction, perhaps when elections are organised, then we'll see more investment being announced in the country.
Many thanks, Edward, for your comments. That's all for now. For more exclusive interviews, stay tuned to Dukascopy TV.